My name is Kristy Pron. I actually grew up in New Jersey, South Jersey. People always ask kind of what exit you're from, and I would just say that I'm from the beginning of the Atlantic City Expressway. And I went to school at Drexel University in Philadelphia, where I got my BS and MS in digital media in 5 years. The year that I went, they started a master's program. So our senior year, there was like 7 of us that were guinea pigs. So we took our master's classes while we were seniors and then took the last year to complete it. My parents helped me pay for undergrad, and so did tennis, but they said you have to figure out how to pay for grad school. So I said, okay. And if I do it faster, then I have to pay less. I, as a kid, would go to Walt Disney World with my family, and we would stay at Fort Wilderness Campground. So I kind of caught the Disney bug when I was a kid. I remember reading a book about Walt Disney Imagineering, and I wanted to figure out how to do it. So I wrote a letter, and I didn't know anyone at the company at the time. So I wrote a letter to the only person that I knew of, which was Michael Eisner, which I did not know him. I just sent a letter, and I got a letter back, and it said for you to major in something that you enjoy, and eventually like it will come full circle. So I did that. I entered a design competition with Disney in college, which was the Disney Imaginations competition. And the point of that competition was to get different students from different colleges and bring diversity to Imagineering. So I entered with a teammate, and we created an attraction based on Finding Nemo, and it was a coaster that went through the EAC, and it was supposed to be an Epcot, and then you popped out into a new land of Australia, which didn't exist. So it was lots of fun. And I actually took third place. From that, I ended up getting an internship at R&D in Glendale, California. So I went out there and I worked for the R&D department. This is around 2007, 2008, where the economy was like doing okay, but not so great. So Disney couldn't offer me a full-time job. So they were going to offer me a contract position. Once you have your master's, you kind of want like healthcare and benefits. Like your parents are like, you should, get a real job. So I ended up leaving the company, and I taught for a bit at Drexel 3D modeling and animation. And then I got a job with the Department of Defense doing simulation and modeling and instructional design. So I was with the government for 6 years. And while I was with the government, I stayed in contact with a lot of people at Disney, and I would contract with them doing parade float models and character heads and different things like that. And then a job appeared for running what is called the Dish, which is the digital immersive showroom. It's basically a cave system at Disney. I applied for that job and I got it. I moved from DC, Maryland area all the way down to Florida. Pretty much been here ever since. My current role is a media arts and pipeline manager. Our team is in charge of helping to get all of the digital assets from building information, audio animatronics, special effects, and we put them all into a visualization so that we can build an attraction before it's actually built in real life, so that we can test things like sight lines and creative reviews and all of those things. So it's basically we create a simulation of an attraction. I've been with Disney now 8 years, and I'm in Florida, and I've always been in Florida.
You did spend a little time in the DC area.
Yes,
Which will come into play a little bit later when we start talking
yes.
about the disaster of 2020.
The conference that never happened where it was supposed to happen.
Yeah, no, you are uniquely situated to have an experience like no other conference chair ever had.
So I got involved in SIGGRAPH in college. I don't remember how I heard about it, but I heard about it and I thought this is really cool. I want to get there. And as you know, SIGGRAPH is not a cheap endeavor for a college student. So what do you have to do to get there? Become a student volunteer. So I became a student volunteer. Boston, 2006 was my first SIGGRAPH. I was a student volunteer for San Diego. And then I was too old to be a student volunteer, because once you're out of school, they say you can't be a student volunteer anymore. But there's this like pathway in the middle that they created, what was then called an XSV. So you're an ex-student volunteer, where you're not quite in the industry, but you're not quite a student volunteer, but we'll keep you involved somehow. So I ended up working with the studio that year. And then I just kind of started meeting people, and I fell into the emerging technologies realm. And I kind of stayed on the subcommittee for a long time until I became the Emerging Technologies Chair in 2015. I did general submissions. I was the first person to be the Experience Hall Chair. So that was inside the experience hall. You have emerging technologies and studio and art gallery and VR village. And it was a person to help rodeo them all together and make them mesh. That's where we started doing those large scale experiences in the middle of the floor. 2015, we had the skull. We would have these like large experiences to kind of draw people in. From that, I went to general submissions chair. And then from general submissions chair, I interviewed to be conference chair in 2020. Little did I know that 2020 was going to be a completely different experience. In 2022, I started the labs program, which is the studio reimagined. I still lurk on emails and help with RFPs. So eTech is a very interesting program because you get a lot of submissions from all over the world. And depending on where they're from, like it doesn't always mesh for certain people. Like it's either over their head or it's wacky or it's all different things. So the goal in 2015, I was trying to make it easy for people to understand what the submissions were and kind of categories. So I remember talking to Freeman, we had these gobo lights of these neighborhoods. So there would be a section that was devoted to VR, or there was a section that was devoted to displays or haptics. So I had all of these different areas so that, you know, when you looked down on the floor, you knew exactly kind of the category of stuff that you were into. And I was trying to find things that were useful to everyday life or useful to your job. And one of the things that actually stands out was we had Ford there. Elizabeth Barron at the time was at Ford. It was a VR experience where they had a controller. It was a laser screen. And basically, you could go in and you could explore a vehicle. And it was an accurate representation of the Ford vehicles that they had on the line. And you could use, they had a flashlight, like a haptic flashlight. And you could go in and you could look at the steering column. You could go inside the glove compartment. You had all of these different things. And it was one of the most useful VR experiences I had seen at the time. It wasn't a game. It wasn't, you know, jumping into lava or anything. It was something that someone uses in actual production. And it was also an industry that is not always seen at SIGGRAPH. Like you have the automotive industry. We're used to seeing film. We're used to seeing things like that. But now you have someone that's inside of kind of the engineering and design realm, which kind of actually resonated with me later on for 2020, which I'll tell you later. And the skull was really cool.
Give us a little backstory of the skull.
The skull, Brett Cressa, he was the designer of the skull, and it was a huge, like 15 feet or 20 feet projected skull. And they had done all of these really cool designs on it. And it was the focal point inside the experience hall. And it took great pictures. And it was a really cool experience for projection mapping and on large scale items. I think 2015 was the first year of the VR Village. Denise was the one that did that. And the cool thing about VR Village that year was she had so much content come in that you couldn't actually show it all in one day. So she would actually have people come in, show it, and then they would leave. And the next day there'd be something new. So that was a really cool experience for SIGGRAPH attendees because every day you come into that experience hall, there's something new to try. There were simulations where, say you're an electrician and you need to work at high altitudes. They had VR simulations for people to learn how to do that. And I think obviously VR has been around for a very, very long time, but I felt like 2015 was a year that we started to see more kind of useful applications of it, more work-driven simulations. It seemed to be more popular at SIGGRAPH that year.
Tell our attendees watching now what it was like to have a show canceled.
So when I started, I was doing an in-person conference. And I already knew that it was going to be different because it was in DC. That was the idea. We were going to a whole new location. And the thought of it was we do a new location. We also bring in different attendees because now we're going to have more people coming from Europe. We'll have more industry. We wanted to focus on education. We wanted to focus on the other areas outside of film to bring in that different feeling on what people are interested in. Engineering and automotive and all that, and still keep the film, but we wanted this different feel. So it's February of 2020. And we're sitting at the CAG meeting and we hear about, this stuff going on with COVID. And I remember sitting at the meeting, like laughing, like, oh, like we're in February. Our conference is in August. We'll be fine. Like none of us, I mean, in my lifetime, I had never experienced anything like that. And I'm not like a worrier either. I was just like, whatever, it'll be fine. It'll be done in like 2 weeks. Meanwhile, it's longer. My wedding gets canceled. Like all this stuff starts happening. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen. We kind of knew that it was going to get canceled before most people because we were waiting on DC. We had this idea that the convention center was going to be used as a makeshift hospital. We were going to get kicked out no matter what. A conference of this magnitude, you have a budget set and you have contracts. And so you can't break contracts or you lose a lot of money. So we could not cancel the conference because we would lose a ton of money because we've paid for the convention center. We've got these housing blocks. So we're waiting and waiting and waiting. We get this inclination that they're going to take the convention center and turn it into a hospital. Like, okay, if they do this, we are not in breach of contract now. They will be in breach of contract. And so that happened. So we didn't lose money from that aspect of it. We had already spent money in the beginning of, because we thought we were in person. So we did our travel meetings and we had layout plans. And so we had done that. When they told us that it is now a hospital, we knew that we did not have a conference anymore in person. So this is like April, and the conference was supposed to be the end of July. And so now we're like, what do we do? Like we have roughly 3 months to come up with a plan of how we put SIGGRAPH on virtually, having never done it. There was a bunch of companies that do virtual conferences. I think we had like 3 or 4 that we met with, and it was really hard to get on their schedule because apparently everybody else is going through the same problem. They have these conferences, they're going to go virtual, and everyone's going to talk to these people. We had landed on this one, and then it was, okay, I'm going to tell my conference chairs we're going virtual. And I need you to rethink your programs to a virtual program. And all the program chairs were amazing. They all went on this ride with me without complaining because we didn't have another option. How do you convert SIGGRAPH to a virtual experience? Because one of the things at SIGGRAPH, you've got the content, that's great. You can send that virtually, but those hallway conversations that you have, receptions, that like family feel, that invigoration you get when you're in the building with people, that's hard to do virtually. And I don't know if we ever actually really captured that. We ended up converting the conference in 3 months. We had a good amount of people on there. And then the other thing is trying to figure out, like, what do you charge people? Because it's now a different experience. It was definitely a roller coaster ride. And we learned a lot the first year. And I think the lessons that we learned in that year kind of translated to 2021. And poor Paul, like who was shadowing me, he doesn't know if he's going to have an in-person conference or a virtual conference. So he knows in person like I did, but now he's getting this to see what it's like to do virtual and figure things out, from like, how do you get all these videos in? How do you do closed captioning? How do you do real-time live on a virtual platform? Definitely not what I expected. If I went back in time, it would still be nice to do an in-person conference because I feel like I didn't get everything, but I did get the keynote. I actually had a fun time getting our keynote. I picked the magician, Marco Tempest. He was a director's fellow at MIT Media Lab. He's done stuff live with drones. He could do things on Zoom, which was really cool. And I feel like people really liked that because it was an engaging keynote. It was less about watching him and just passively participating, but seeing someone do things magically over Zoom. I know it was recorded and it was fun. He was a really fun keynote. We were on another platform that would use a Zoom and webinar rooms. We had to redo our budget too for SIGGRAPH. So we had our original budget, which was for an in-person conference. Then we had to factor in the money that we spent. Then we had to factor in what is our now working budget for a virtual conference, because you also know that you're not going to get the same money from the conference passes coming in too, because you can't charge the full conference pass for a virtual conference. It also depended on where their time zone is too, because if you're running the conference on PST time or EST time, like that's great for the people in the United States, but if you've got someone from Asia, that's a lot harder. We had to take into account who our speakers were and whether or not they were going to give us a pre-recorded video, or if they were going to do it live. And then there's a different cost for if you're going to run something live as a webinar, or if something is pre-recorded. There was a lot more on the contributors end now as a virtual conference, because we're asking you to pre-record your piece now, and then we're going to edit them all. We're going to make sure that we can try to get closed captioning. We didn't get all of that on all of them. Then we have to upload them all, and then we have to decide how we're going to release content too. So the technical papers that year, I believe we released them early. They didn't talk about the technical paper at the conference like you would normally do. They had like roundtable sessions on Zoom for you to ask questions. So we were trying to get more of that back and forth with the speakers instead of you just like watching the video. Because we also have to deal with now, people have been on Zoom from work since March. So you have this fatigue, Zoom fatigue. Do you really want to go to a conference now and be on Zoom too? Like, I think we all kept hoping that maybe it'll be in person somehow. Immersive Pavilion was a very hard one. If you have a headset, you might be able to have the downloaded executable for someone to run it. But if you don't, you're just going to watch a video of what the experience could have or should have been. Real time live, they did do real time, which was great. And then we did the CAF for the first year. You would pay for the ticket or you would get the ticket with your experience. And then you had 48 hours maybe to watch it once you started. And they kept that for 2021. They did the same thing. They might have done it for 2022 as an option, because now in at least 2022, we have this experience where we have an in-person conference with a virtual component too. So there was some good that came out of 2020 by learning how to add that extra virtual experience for people that can't travel or feel like it's not safe to travel. I think SIGGRAPH has morphed a little bit to try to encompass what all attendees might want in some capacity.
The way the Pioneers dealt with that issue that you're talking about how do you do interactive, we had Doug Trumbull do a pre-recorded presentation for the Pioneers. We opened that up to the public 2 weeks before the conference began. And then either a week later or 2 weeks later, then Doug came back. We did a one-on-one where I was talking to him and the Pioneers could ask questions and things like that. So we had both components, the pre-recorded and some kind of interactive, which worked pretty well.
With that too, like SIGGRAPH usually runs a week in person, but because it was virtual, we were able to extend it for, I think it ran like a month and a half. We opened it, and then I think we might have left it up until October, because we did push the dates a little bit to like late August of that year, and then just left it open, which I think is great for people too, because then you don't have to try to read all your technical papers in 1 week. And then you can just go at your own leisure, which was nice, especially if you have families.
And I just want to remind everybody of the time frame that we're talking about. In 2020, there were no vaccines. The vaccines started in February of 21. So in 2020, everybody was really concerned about dying.
It ruined my wedding.
No.
Well, I was supposed to get married March 15th, 2020. And pretty much everyone was told not to go back to work on March 16th, 2020. So we canceled our wedding, got married by a notary who is also an Imagineer. We postponed our wedding until November, at which point still no one wanted to really travel. So we had 14 people.
A wedding where everybody was wearing masks.
Pretty much, except they said if you were all part of the same party, since there was only 14 of us, that you didn't have to wear a mask at the one resort we were at. So
yeah, that was during the days of pods. You had pods of people that wouldn't die together.
Exactly.
We're going to look back and go, oh my God, I can't believe we lived through 2020.
I ate a lot of ice cream. That's an inside, it's not even a joke. It's an inside thing at SIGGRAPH. When things started going wrong that year, people felt bad for me, and they know that I'm not a drinker, but I eat ice cream. So they sent me ice cream. For me, like the thing about SIGGRAPH is they're like family. It may be different for different people. Like you go to SIGGRAPH for inspiration, but because I've been on the committee so long, I think I've volunteered for SIGGRAPH for 17 years. It's like, I want to go back every year to see the content, but I want to go back every year to see everyone that I've worked with in the last 17 years. And I think the other thing is, for people that are interested in volunteering, you can never start too low, I guess. Like I started as a student volunteer, and then I made connections, and then I got to be conference chair. I don't know if it was the great year to be conference chair, but still it was an experience. And I learned so much. I met a bunch of people in the industry. That's a great experience that you get from SIGGRAPH too.
Kristy Pron, thank you so much.